Isn't that the name of the book?
Hello.
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 Live with our second panel of the day. So we're going to talk about police procedurals. I've been joined by Susan Wilkins and Diane Saxon so far, and we should have Kate Rhodes joining us soon, hopefully. Do you want to start us off with an introduction to yourself and your books, ladies? Maybe start with Susan because she was here first.
Oh, okay. I was hoping
in the middle.
Yes. Okay. I'm Susan Wilkins. I have had quite a long career as a writer because I started off as a TV writer, which is something that I did for about 25 years. So that tells you how old I am. I had a bit of a health crisis, and that's what turned me to writing novels, because it really wasn't feasible for me to carry on as a TV writer anymore. It was just a bit too much like stressful hard work. So anyway, I worked on lots of top-rated shows, soaps, from absolutely everything. But when it came to deciding to write, I was very, very drawn to crime fiction. And I've now published 12 crime fiction novels, and they are a range of things from, I started off doing a sort of gangster crime fiction. I moved on to doing police procedurals set in Devon, and I now do what most people would call psychological thrillers. That's me.
Diane?
I'm Diane Saxon. I actually have been relatively new to the writing scene in comparison to Susan. I think my first book I wrote in 2010. I've written, in fact, my 20th book is about to be published. And I started off writing romance for the American public. And so I was writing romance, and I met an agent who said my books were getting progressively darker. And she said to me, she read my first 3 chapters, and this was at the RNA. And she read my first 3 chapters of one of my books that I was writing. And she said, this should not be a romance. This should be pure thriller. Can you just write this as a pure thriller? And I said, yeah, because I was getting really dark. And really, I think that was always inside me, that I probably would be killing people for a living. And so off I went, and I wrote this book as a complete thriller. There is a relationship, and this is what my this agent said to me to do, was make it about the relationship between these 2 sisters. And so off I went, and I wrote it, and I sent it off to only 2 places. I sent it off back to the agent who'd given me the advice, and to Boldwood Books, who were literally opening their doors on the particular month that I happened to have my book ready. And so I sent it off to both of those, and the agent turned me down, and Boldwood Books gave me a 4-book deal. And now I'm on my 3rd contract with them, and just keep writing, and I just love it. So yeah, that's what I like to do, is kill people for a living.
Marvellous. We've got hellos from Ken Ward, who says he's looking forward to this chat. Sam said hello, Karen has said hello, and Laura has. So far.
Just to pick up on something that Diane said, I think actually you lucked out there, because the fact that the agent didn't want you meant you've sent, say, 15%.
15%.
Exactly. So, more fool them, I say.
Well, it was just one of those things that I, after having done the work basically for her, if you like, with her advice, which was fantastic advice. And I will forever be grateful for that, because literally, I sent my first manuscript in. It's Find Her Alive, and I sent that first manuscript in, and within 3 weeks I had my 4-book deal, which, and I know a lot of authors do struggle to get deals.
Yeah, they do.
As you say, I lucked out. I really did, because it just all fell into place, and I'm in a really good position now without an agent.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you can do it all ways round.
You can
If
do it
there's
always.
aspiring authors out there, you don't always have to these days go through an agent. There are all sorts of routes to publishing, aren't there?
Yeah. I mean, I also think that it's really, really interesting that you were a kind of romantic novelist before, because I've met quite a few novelists who've gone from the sort of romance and relationships to the dark side, if you like. And I think that's no coincidence, because I think, romance is all about love and relationships, and psychological thrillers are like the sort of dark twin of romance. They're what happens when love goes wrong.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And that, as you will know, there is a sort of snobbery about whether you write, a certain snobbery in publishing, whether you write romance sometimes, and it's almost looked down on. And you go, no, do you know what? That's actually where I cut my teeth on writing relationships, because as you've just said, psychological thrillers are the reverse side, the flip side, aren't they, really,
Absolutely.
of love and romance. And then you've got, but it's all about relationships, because without relationships, you can't have any of these events that go on in any of the books. But I think also it's picked up when I have my thrillers out, it is picked up that I write relationships, and that's sort of, it's character driven rather than just plot driven. And you've written for TV, Susan.
Yeah.
So you've probably written from the character side first and bring it into your stories that way.
Oh, absolutely. And I think for me, television was the kind of best education in how to do that, because all the time what you're looking at is you pass your script over to an actor and you see what they do with it and what they need. And I learned more from that whole process than I can possibly sort of say. And I mean, I don't think it's any coincidence that psychological thrillers, and really it's psychological thrillers that have a police element in them, but they're driven by the characters. And I think we're basically, absolutely on the same page here. And readers love that, because it's about, why do people who are ordinary people like us, who've got ordinary lives, how is it that they just step over that line, and anger or something drives them into bad behavior, which kind of ends up with crime? Because most people who commit a crime don't think they're actually doing anything wrong. They usually think that they're justified. I mean, even if you go back into, like, classic fiction, I mean, Macbeth thought he had a point of view. He thought he was right. He thought he was doing the best for Scotland.
And he had his point of view, but he didn't listen to anybody else's, which is, that's what it's all about. Writing these characters, you write them from a viewpoint of, observation of people in your life, and maybe something we've done ourselves, and you go, oh, there, but for the grace of God, you might have just done something that was just slightly not right, and then your imagination picks it up, and it opens the gates of, well, if I continued down that route, when you're being, I don't know, when somebody's really annoyed you, and you just hold back at that moment where it's important. But when you're writing a character that doesn't hold back, and I think that's when it counts, is it's that character that doesn't hold back, that actually does believe that their viewpoint is the only viewpoint. And that's what makes it interesting.
While we're on characters, do you want to start us off? Because we're talking about police procedurals, aren't we?
Oh, we are, yes.
Today. So,
sorry about that.
No, it's all right.
Off we go.
Off we go.
You were doing a fabulous job. Very interesting. Do you want to introduce us to the main, like, police character in your?
Well, you go first this time, Diane.
So I've got one series at the moment, and my others are more of a domestic thriller. side of things without the police procedural. But my main series is the DS Jenna Morgan series, which has proved very, very popular. Everybody seems to love, and again, it's about the characters. So my characters come first. My story is dragged along by the characters. They throw in, the bombs that we're not expecting. And then I have a husband who is a retired police officer who, poor guy, is nudged at 3 o'clock in the morning because that's the moment that I'm actually mid scene and I need his help. But my characters, so I've got DS Jenna Morgan, and she's got her sidekick of Mason, he's almost like an old-fashioned police officer. How I remember my husband being when he first started being a police officer, because we've been together since forever. I got married when I was 19 to him, and I can remember his different phases, if you like, of being a police officer. So the little rookie who was keen and enthusiastic and did a lot of things, little hiccups and what have you along the way, to being a very mature, understanding, and, really sort of broad knowledge guy. And I've tried to feed that into all of my characters. So I've got, the inspector and the chief inspector, and they're just their little idiosyncrasies and their characters that meld in with Jenna and Mason. And then we've got the youngster, Ryan, who does a lot of things wrong, and he just in his enthusiasm. So that's my series characters.
Right. Well, I've got, I suppose, really, I've got 3 different sorts of cops in my series. The current series has as the kind of police officer who runs through it, DS Joe Bowden, and the series is called the DS Joe Bowden Case Files. But what I deliberately did with this, because I suppose because of my background in TV and screenwriting, I took a slightly different structural approach to this, which is to say, I just want the police officer to be a kind of person who is doing an everyday job. This is her job. She comes in, she does the case, she goes home, gets a takeaway, and that's that really.
So she's real.
Yeah,
that's what we
try
and do, isn't it?
She's real. So with each book, the main character, the structure of each book is kind of a bit more like a standalone. So the main character, the protagonist in each book, is a separate person whose story that particular book is, and at some point something happens that the police have to become involved, and along comes DS Joe Bowden. And I did that after I'd done a couple of police procedurals set down in Devon, near Brixham, which is basically where I live. That was much more about, that's DS Megan Thomas, who was a police officer who'd been in the Met in London, worked undercover, was somewhat traumatized. Or this has become a bit of a trope, actually, although I have to say it wasn't so much of a trope when I did this. Bit traumatized by what's happened to her in London, comes down for supposedly a quieter life in Devon, and guess what? It's not so quiet. So that's my other police character. The first books that I started off doing, which I am going to go back and write some more of, was much more, excuse me, a gangster fiction about a particular kind of gangster family. But the main gangster character in that, who of course had a fantastic name, Kaz, had a very kind of conflict-ridden relationship with a police officer, and it was about the sort of corruption existing on both sides of the law. So the police officer, who was called Nikki Armstrong, was trying to fight corruption within the Met, within her whole situation. And actually, I did receive quite a lot of help with all 3 of these characters from one of your people that you've got on later, Graham Bartlett, who I have known for kind of a number of years back in Brighton, and he's been extremely helpful in helping me with the sort of shape of the police characters. But I must admit, having someone there at 3 o'clock in the morning next to you, I think that would be preferable.
I think, do you know what? One of the things that really is good is that, so basically, my husband, and I know he doesn't mind me saying this, he doesn't have an imagination. So he's not trying to put his ideas into my story. He literally, I will say to him, because one of the things, and you'll appreciate this, Susan, with doing TV dramas, sometimes it's about the drama, and not necessarily the character. It's about the drama. It's about the bashing down of doors by police officers, which in general doesn't happen as often as it's portrayed on the screen. But so I'll say to him, so if I want to come and talk to somebody about, say, fraud, what would you do? Because quite often you see them or you read something and it's the chief inspector walking in, and well, that never happens. Never happens. But you might have a sergeant, which is, you've made it true. You've made yours sergeant, and what have you. Because your chief inspector does not do that job. He's normally sitting there trying to arrange the next shift pattern,
and do the budget.
The budget, and defending anything that's happened and talking to the press and things like that. So what my hubby brings to it is a reality. So I can say to him, what would you do step by step? And he's really, now I've written 4 books of this series, and I do intend to write more of this one, but I'm caught up on some of the domestic thrillers for a little while, but I am going to revisit it. And basically I'll say to him, could you step me through it? And he's got so used to this, we're actually working, and I'll say, step me through every single stage. And basically his answer to most of it is, you normally don't need violence. You normally can talk your way. Normally, if it's an upright citizen, which is what we were talking about before, Susan, was, most people don't step over that mark.
No, they don't.
Into crime, but some do. But quite often when a police officer turns up on somebody's doorstep, say they've committed fraud, the person will go, oh, there's a uniform. Yes, I did it. I did it.
Oh my God, they're knocking at my door.
And that is it.
They're not getting out a gun and going, stick them up. No,
and they're not running at the police officer with a a rolling pin or whatever. That that's, yes, it happens. Obviously, it happens, but that's not your day to day. And most people will open the door, and you just you start off a conversation with them as a police officer, and you say, can we go through? Can we sit down? We'd like to discuss this with you. What do you know about it? And they'll go, oh, it was me, and that's it. That is the sum total.
End of,
which, that's probably 70% of a police officer's life is actually dealing with that sort of thing. Crime is committed, I can't remember how many times a minute, but, all the time. And mostly it's resolved. But we're not dealing with that, Susan and I. We're dealing with those ones that go that step further.
Yeah, I mean, my character of DS Joe Bowden is actually part of a murder investigation team, and they're obviously specialised. They're not the response officers who come to people's door if you ring up the police and you get, a car comes round. They're not response. But I think one of the problems for me as a storyteller, putting together what the police actually do with a good story, is that in all of these teams there are loads of people and they all have very specialist jobs, and it's not just police officers. There's a lot of civilian analysts, there's a lot of people who do all the forensic side of it, and everything is compartmentalized because you have to create a case that is going to go through the Crown Prosecution Service into a court of law. Now, I know a little bit about this because my background is that I studied law before I ever got into television. I was supposed to be a lawyer and I thought, I can't do that, I'll go into television instead. But anyway, the point is getting evidence that will stand up in court is an incredibly lengthy, laborious procedure, and that's not going to give you the drama of one particular police officer in jeopardy who rushes from X to Y to Z. So I think what we have to do as storytellers is we, as you've absolutely said quite rightly, Diane, we're making a balance between what's a good story and what is plausible. Because who wants to just look at kind of real life? And I mean, I know with television, I know that the various police advisors that I've had, and I've worked on some TV shows as well. And what we got a lot of the time is, well, no, that wouldn't happen. You can't do that. You can't do that. You talk to any police officer, and I'm sure, Diane, your husband is the same, about Line of Duty, the TV show, which everybody loves. And they go, oh, God, I hate Line of Duty. They do it all wrong, all wrong.
Do you know, my husband loves it. We sit.
Okay.
It's normally me who's going, they're doing that. But
well, maybe.
There's this huge enjoyment. I think sometimes you've got to park the reality and go, this is actually for pure entertainment, which when you're writing, I think we write more because obviously a TV series is there, bam, they've got to get the character, they've got to get the movement, they've got to get everything, going straight away, and it's there, done, finished. And it's so fast moving that you can understand why you have to sort of suspend belief to a certain extent. But I think you kind of have to get that in your books. But when you're writing series like you and I are doing, when you're writing series, you've got that lovely time for development. You can start to introduce little idiosyncrasies of your characters, and then you can have this other crime bit. And as you said, my husband said to me, you can't do that. You can't do that. And I go, right, I am doing this. What would happen if this happened? He goes, right, okay then. And he does. He's really good at sort of giving a different viewpoint, because I'm there, running away with a storyline, and he's going, yes, but if this happened, this would happen. And I suddenly go, oh, of course it would. Of course it would. So he's very much my voice of reason as well as. But I also get to meet, which is lovely, because he was in the job for 33 years. So I also get to meet some of the people who were in specialist places and what have you as well. And I sort of go, oh, can I take you for coffee? Don't you just love that when you just say,
absolutely.
Can I take you for a coffee? And you get so much out of a cup of coffee.
You can get quite a lot out of it. I mean, I recall one specialist police officer that I went to see. This is a few years ago now, and this was to do with it was actually to do with fraud and sort of computer crime. And I went to see this guy, and he had been in the Met doing early stuff on cyber fraud, but then had gone to work for one of the main kind of banks to kind of advise them. And I sat there with my notebook for an hour, kind of writing madly all the kind of notes on all the complexities of that. But I'll tell you, the first thing I did when I got home is I got my phone and I deleted the banking app and got in touch with the bank and said, no, I just paper statements. I don't want that. You're not doing that anymore. So sometimes it can be a little bit like that.
It can, but I did have before COVID, just literally before COVID, I met up with a guy who was on some very, very specialist. Hello.
Hello. Oh, I'm so sorry, guys. My computer has been completely and totally not playing the game. I'm really sorry.
No, hello, welcome.
Welcome.
I'm sorry about that. I bet you've been saying some fantastic things and I haven't even heard you. I'm sorry.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sunday.
Now you've arrived.
Yeah, sorry, I'll just say who I am briefly. And again, I'm really, really sorry. I'm Kate Rhodes, crime writer. Currently writing a series set down in the Isles of Scilly in Cornwall, where I spend an awful lot of time. So yeah, that's me. And I'm really sorry again. Oh, computers, they're the bane of our lives, aren't they?
Yeah.
All right. It's a perfect time actually to ask you Alex's question. So Alex is watching, and he said, "Hi, ladies. I'm curious about the developments between psychological thrillers and police procedurals. Could you tell us where these two genres merge, and what do you think are the future trends in them?"
I think Susan should go first, and we'll get, just allow Kate to settle in for a second.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think that the reason that I write psychological thrillers is, if you like, where my starting point is when I'm writing something, which is, as Diana and I have already been talking about, the characters. But you see, I think there are several ways in which you can kind of approach it. And I think when you think about relationships between people, we all have our different stories about what's going on. And if you place that in families or close knit groups where you've got a lot of affection, there's always a different side of the story. And mostly we just go, oh God, my sister, she never listens to me. Or we go, oh God, my friend, she never shuts up. I can't get a word. All the things that people start doing in their lives, if you start to push that a little bit to the point at which it kind of goes over the edge into behavior that is unacceptable, and then you add, so you're always kind of ramping up the conflict. And because of my background in TV writing, that was what we were always doing. We're always jacking up the conflict. It's like, if you put two characters in a room, you write the preamble to what they're going to say to each other, then you get to a certain point, and actually then you cut that out because you're going to cut straight into the scene, and it's going to go boom, you said, no, I didn't, and that's kind of the drama side of it. So, and to answer Alexander's question a bit more specifically, I think that psychological thrillers have become hugely fascinating to people because everybody knows what it's like to be absolutely kind of annoyed with a sibling, annoyed with your partner, your husband, your wife. But most of us don't go to the kitchen drawer and get a knife and lose our temper with them.
Speak for yourself.
Some people sort of think about that.
Yeah.
I think from my point of view, as I've already said, when you're talking about putting that together with what the police do, you can either have the police officer as the main character and make a thriller around the police officer, but that usually involves the police officer being in a great deal of kind of jeopardy. If like they're the main character, it's like, yes, whatever, is investigating this crime, and someone is stalking her, and can she, if you have that kind of trajectory, that's how. And I think a lot of editors push for making a police main character into a much more of a psychological thriller character, which is why I've turned it the other way around and if you like, written a standalone in which the police just appear in it, but they're not the main character. As for future trends in the kind of subgenre, I don't know. I'd be interested what the rest of you think, because I think a lot of the main tropes have been done to death. And how do you move into other areas? I see a lot of really good not police procedurals, psychological thrillers coming out that are perhaps a bit more closer to being political thrillers. I see a lot of police procedurals that are looking at what is a kind of big subject in the ether at the moment, which is police corruption. If you look at, what's going on in the Met. But anyway, that's basically my answer to that.
Shall I go next?
Yeah, go for it. I'm still cogitating.
I agree with actually everything Susan said. And quite often, I think with psychological and police, I don't think you can separate the police from the psychological, because even down to, a young PC knocking on somebody's door because he's abusing his wife or whatever, they have to read characters, and that is what psychological is about. It's about reading characters. Psychological doesn't mean to say it's you psycho. It is all about the reading of characters. And I think, police procedural and psychological in that way go hand in hand. You can't write a police procedural without it having some kind of psychological element, which, we're not just talking about murderers and so on, are we?
No.
But that sort of deep thinking of the way something is. And when you write a psychological, for instance, I wrote a particular book, and I met a lady who'd read it, and she said, "Oh, you're sick. You're absolutely sick." And when she explained to me why I was sick, it wasn't actually my mind, it was hers. And that is what psychological is about. It affects every reader in a slightly different way. I mean, I don't know about Susan and Kate, but I've occasionally been, because I write domestic thrillers as well. And I was told by somebody, you should have put a trigger warning on this. But what do you put? If you're writing a psychological thriller, that is the trigger warning in itself, in my opinion.
Yeah, don't
Because
read
honestly,
crime fiction.
yeah, honestly, if you're going to be scared by something, it might be that somebody's buried a cat, and 50 people say you should have given us a trigger warning, or it might just be that a child has been smacked or whatever. You can't put a trigger warning for every single thing, so you can't go trigger warnings and do this whole list of everything. Psychological is what affects a specific person at that time, and I think that's the big thing, is that it's not the psychological and the crime and the police procedural go very much hand in hand, and quite often people will have different opinions of, in fact that's the whole point of it, is they have different opinions and different viewpoints. And that's why sometimes when we do this fantastic twist at the end of our thrillers, some people go, yeah, got that, knew that, and other people go, oh, didn't see that coming. So and I do think that going along from that, there's subgenres. I write the domestic thrillers now, which occasionally have a police officer arrive, but I haven't made them police procedural. And I think the domestic crime is a big subgenre to look out for now.
Yeah, I think
Kate, we seem to have lost Susan for a moment.
No, she probably took one look at me and thought, that's it, I'm off.
I'm off.
I really actually agree with everything that you said, Diane, to be honest, because I think, yeah, these trigger warnings that people want on books now, it's kind of, well, if you're going to buy a thriller or a crime novel, you're going to get some danger and some jeopardy and some death in there, aren't you, really?
Yeah.
As for the relationship between psychology and procedural, I think the line between those two genres is just getting thinner all the time, because it used to be that if you bought a police procedural book, you're going to get a nice kind of straightforward investigation and a denouement at the end, and everybody walked away happy. But now you've got really fully rounded sort of 360-degree characters, and I think that's got to be good. I completely agree with Diane and Susan that, human police officers are human beings as well, and they've got complex minds just like everybody else. And that's what we read these books for, I think, to understand the complexity perhaps of our own psychology as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also, as crime writers ourselves, we're invested in doing our research. I mean, I've done forensics courses online, there's a couple of universities that do forensics courses, because I really want to know as much as I can possibly know about a subject. If I'm writing about a child that's been found in a freezer, I don't just want to know about, that particular aspect of it. I will look into the whole thing, in order to write a paragraph. I will research it to make sure, and you'll both be the same. You do so much background research, you do so much. As Susan, I said before, Kate, you came in, you take somebody for a cup of coffee and you gain so much information and so much relevance, and you come away and, you might not write about it for a week or two, because you're processing everything that you've been told, and then it can come out of the, and you pick this, you cherry pick what you found, but you've got this big knowledge behind. And I think that's what's happening now, is that writers are going, oh, you might get criticized for something you've said wrong in your police procedural. So you make sure you really don't want to be criticized, because you don't want to lead somebody or distract somebody from the book. You want that to flow.
Yeah. And you're right that face-to-face research is really important, isn't it? I mean, it can shape a whole story, I think. Just a few little nuggets that you get from a police officer or from a forensics officer can really steer your story for you. It has for me.
I think it does. I think it does, yeah.
But following on from Alex's question, what I'm interested in is when you think about like crime fiction, you think about the police procedural novel as being like the main thing that everyone reads or watches on TV. How do you, when you're like writing your series that's going to be in that genre, how do you make it stand out from all of the others that are there so that people are going to go and buy it?
Do you know, I don't think it's the police procedural that stands out necessarily. I mean, some people really want to read a police procedural, and you do a bit of character development, and Kate and Susan will appreciate this. You get this thing you get a review that says, get on with the story, but we don't just jump in and go, this happened, that happened, the other happened, and this is the police procedural. It's about the characters, and that has to be, from my point of view, that has to be the driving force of the story. Otherwise, you're going to have a boring story. The police procedural should, from my point of view, thread through nicely. It should be able to, and I'm very lucky because I do have hubby at home who, I'm halfway through a scene and I can stop and say to him, should we have a coffee? Sometimes I do. Tell me about this, So I actually think maybe in that way, mine do stand out from that point of view, of that character development that just then hopefully seamlessly, combines with the police procedural. But I'm not overly heavy on the police procedural. I don't want to go into every dot and T crossing and all of that in the police procedural. I want it to be a really, really interesting, strong story first.
Yeah, I mean, I think, sorry, I don't know why I disappeared there. I mean, talk about computer glitches. I presume
we missed you. We missed you.
You did. Honestly, I didn't touch anything. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I mean, I think to answer this question in a way, maybe you've got to go back a bit into the kind of history of crime fiction, because whereas the golden age of crime fiction, Agatha Christie and all that, is one stream that comes into, has constructed what crime fiction is. There's a very important kind of source of crime fiction that I think comes from Charles Dickens, and particularly Charles Dickens's book Bleak House. And that's where you see the first proper police detective, Inspector Bucket, who was based on, I think Kate's having more problems than me with the computer here. Inspector Bucket was based on a real police officer who ran the first detective branch at Scotland Yard. So that, but then if you think about that tradition, Dickens wasn't writing a police procedural. I mean, Bleak House is about a lot of things. It's a wide fiction book, and I think a lot of writers who supposedly write police procedurals are much more interested in writing about wider society and using the police procedural as a kind of lens for that. And one of the most important things that I've always was once told years and years ago, and I'm sure the other two have heard this, is that fiction is the lie that tells the truth. So by making up a story, a complex story, you are hoping to produce some kind of truth. And I think that line runs all the way back to Dickens and Bleak House. Bleak House is about how the legal system was corrupt, what to do about that, how to do, any kind of number of things. And out of that came Inspector Bucket, closely followed by, in Wilkie Collins, Sergeant Clough. Is it Cuff or Clough? I can't remember. And, any number of people who've written police procedurals since then, I think, are coming out of that stream. But it's about society. It's about a level of realism. And getting back to our earlier question, Alexander's question, that overlaps with psychological thrillers, because that's about why do people lie? Why do people do all the stuff they do? How do we get ourselves in so much trouble? Answers to those questions, we're always asking them. Why am I such a fool? Why did I do that stupid thing? Why did I lie to my mother about that? Why did I lie to my kids? Oh no, what am I going to do now? We all want to know.
And I think that one of the things with the psychological is the person who doesn't say, why did I lie? They do it and they go, I got away with that. And that's what we write about, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a good question, though, the whole idea of, what is it that makes a piece of writing original? It's so hard for any of us to stand out in such a big market where everybody's doing a really good job of telling great crime stories. And I suppose what I feel about that personally is if you write about things that matter to you, things that you know about, that you care about, you've got half a chance of sort of making them original and interesting for everybody else. And I always just think to myself when I'm starting a book, am I going to be passionate about this subject at the end of the year when I've been thinking about it all year long? And yeah, if I feel certain that that's the case, then I'll stick with it. If not, then I'll sling it and try something else. But I think it's the passion that we bring to it that makes things stand out. I don't know, Susan, if you feel the same, or Diane, that it helps to care about what you write.
I think you've got to love. I think you've got to love what you're writing. And when you're writing something, sometimes you just have to put that in, don't you? You just have to put. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks at that time. If you put it in because you care about it, as you say, it's got to be right. It's got to be because it's you and it's your sort of perspective on things.
That's right.
I think in some ways I would agree with all that both of you have said. And sometimes, not always, I find myself in a state of mind where I think, what really upsets me at the moment? What gets under my skin? What is it that's going on in the world that really, really hacks me off? And I certainly had a thing recently because of, I guess, everything that was going on in the political sphere of, I am fed up with people who just lie all the time and get away with it. Now, this may be a very, personal approach of me, not necessarily typical of all writers. And so I thought, well, I'm gonna put that into a story, the idea that somebody is just a completely pathological liar. But other times it's other things, the first book that I wrote in the Joe Bowden series, which is called She's Gone, is actually about a woman whose daughter goes off to university, and 3 weeks after she's been there, she disappears and various things happen, and it is a psychological thriller. But it very much chimed into the whole thing of when your kids leave home and you have to let go of them anyway, you know, how do you feel? And you want to sort of go and see them, and actually you've got to leave them alone because they need to get on with their lives, and that sort of separation of parent and child. So it comes out of a personal place and becomes a story about something else. But having said that, I had somebody who is in my kind of on my newsletter group write to me recently, a guy from the States, from the west coast of America, and the book that I'd just been that I brought out then was called See Me Fall, and it had a woman who it started off actually with a whole situation of rape, and this guy wrote me this really sweet email saying, "Oh, I've just finished your book and I really, really enjoyed it, but I'm really kind of worried about you because I think you must have had some terrible experiences with men in your life, you know, and I hope you've got somebody nice in your life who's kind of good to you," sort of thing. And I thought, well, what do I sort of say to him? Because you know, thank you for being concerned, but don't worry about me. You know, I haven't had terrible experiences with men in my life, but also, you know, I haven't run a drug cartel and I haven't shot any Russians. It's a story. So there's that,
you know, he was really invested in your character, really invested, which is such a flattering viewpoint. You know, you get some people who become so involved that you actually feel responsible for them because you pulled them into your story in such a way, and you obviously touched his heart then, didn't you? Which is lovely. That's just good writing.
Yeah, well, yeah. So it's
sorry.
Yeah.
I'm going to borrow a question from one of the earlier panels now, because I thought it was brilliant. It's Philip Jordan. He said, if you are falsely accused of a crime, what famous police detective, fictional, would you like to investigate and help you out?
Can I not just have my husband?
No, you can't have.
Although
no, sorry,
he would say, yes, she did it. Can I have thinking time?
Yeah, you sure can. Who wants to go first?
I think I'm going to go for it. I'm sure everybody's probably thinking the same. I think for me, it's going to have to be Miss Marple. I mean, I just love the way she goes about it with a cup of tea and a biscuit and a friendly chat. There's nothing. I mean, now that I am an old lady myself, I realise that I can ask anybody absolutely anything. They never take offence. So I think she's a cunning assassin in disguise, really, Miss Marple. I loved reading those books as a kid as well. They never fade, do they?
Okay, so
I think I would go for Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, I was going to say.
Just for the sheer hell of it, because he's going to bring some excitement to the party, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you're talking about a kind of fictional person, then the absolute dogged, brilliant detective like Sherlock Holmes, like Miss Marple, like Hercule Poirot, those who have exceptional powers of deduction are going to be, you know, who you want to defend you. If you're talking about kind of something a bit more realistic, police officers, that becomes a bit more complex because there are loads of fantastic police detective creations out there. So, you know, but a lot of those are going to be very worried about their own lives, and, you know, they're all going to have problems of their own. So they're not going to be focused on your problems. So probably I wouldn't pick any of the kind of current crop of, you know, famous kind of police detectives, because, you know, they've all got alcohol problems or wife problems or husband problems or dog problems, or, you know, they've all got something. So don't pick one of those. I think
They come with their
we're all
own
going
baggage.
for the historical ones, aren't we? You know, I think Diane and I'll have to share Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, I don't share. I don't share.
Probably solved 2 cases in one, can't he? Sam says she's sticking with JB Fletcher and Magnum PI.
Magnum PI.
Oh, yeah. Just because he's really handsome.
Yeah.
Probably.
I have to say, probably one of the best people would be Columbo, wouldn't he? I mean, you know, moving on, moving sort of, you know, to, he's not modern day, but there's something so classic about him. But it's his doggedness. He would just keep chipping away. So, you know, Columbo as well. And I used to love watching that, where he would just go to walk out the door and then just turn around and go, oh, one last question. And I think, you know, he could sell it to me.
While we're on the sort of fictional bandwagon, what have you read this year that you've really enjoyed? My favourite question. Gotta ask you.
I'm a major Karen Slaughter fan. Absolutely love Karen Slaughter, and she doesn't tend to be police procedural, but I absolutely love her books. She's one of my don't even bother reading the blurb, just buy the book.
Yeah, I call those to shut up and take my money off.
But I will also say one of my favourite police procedural authors, I've got 2, Ross Greenwood, who I read his books. I beta read his books, and Cara Hunter, who does a lovely police procedural. Both of those have absolutely cracking series.
I think for me, I mean, the things I've really been enjoying this year have been, the things I've been enjoying have been rereads, actually. I love, I read an awful lot of Scandinavian fiction, sort of general fiction and detective fiction. And I've been looking back at Henning Mankell, who I think is the first crime author I really felt inspired by. Such a beautiful writer, such a great stylist, as well as brilliantly in-depth character portraits. So I've been reading all of the Kurt Wallander books again. And for me, they're even better than the series on TV. They're so nuanced and interesting.
Nice.
You've given me a bit of brain freeze here, because I'm trying to think, what have I been reading lately? I quite like quite a lot of American fiction, and I think that's because of the crossover between a lot of American writers and television. And Dennis Lehane is one of my favourites. You know, Shutter Island and all that. Now, I'm trying to remember the book that I read most recently, and I think it's him, or is it? Somebody's going to tell me if this is wrong. A Drink Before the War, about 2 private eyes, and it's a very American book. And I find that something that takes me completely out of my own environment is what I want to be reading when I'm writing. And I either have to do that by reading something that's in a totally different time and place. I'm not so keen on the historical stuff, although I do go back and read some of that. Or I need to read non-fiction. Otherwise I end up, it's a bit like, you know, if you read too much Jane Austen, you end up speaking like Jane Austen. So, well, some people.
Yeah, got to be careful there.
Got to be careful there. So, you know, it's almost like it has to be something kind of opposite to what I'm doing. That's what I anyway. Otherwise, I just get, you know, I get confused.
You are correct. Sam says it was Dennis Lehane.
It was Dennis Lehane. Oh, I thought so.
Good Sam Brownlee.
Yeah, thank you, Sam.
Researching it while you were saying.
Thank you, Sam. It was Dennis Lehane.
I also.
Oh my goodness! Sorry, I'd completely forgotten I had a friend arriving. Sorry.
Did you say?
Hopeless panelists.
I actually
first the computer breaks, then a load of mates turn up.
Yeah, it is Sunday. It is Sunday, Kate.
Yes, it is Sunday. I also find that when I'm writing so much, particularly if I'm on a deadline, I still love to be able to read, if you like, but I have developed a great affection for audiobooks. Absolutely love audiobooks. I can listen to them while I'm cleaning out the chickens, when I'm scrubbing toilets, when I'm cooking. I don't do all of that with the same, obviously.
You wear rubber gloves.
I wash very well, and I wear rubber gloves for certain things. But that audiobook experience I've found lately, probably the last year, I've been listening to audiobooks, and there's some absolutely fantastic narrators out there, and I just really, really have taken to it. And it just means that when you've had a screen time all day, when you can still relax and listen to a book, and it's a real book. And I think it takes a bit of practice. I found I zoned out to start with, but then you come back to it, and I've realized now that I don't zone out anymore. I keep a track, and especially if it's a fast moving, police procedural, and you've got everything just going boom, 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 and it's, audio, brilliant.
Do you all have your books available on audio?
I do.
Some of mine, and some of them I don't.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. All of my psychological thrillers are, yeah.
Yeah, mine all are. And I got kind of lucky with the latest series that I got to choose the actor from the voice bank. So that was kind of weird. I was thinking, oh, what does he actually sound like? Needs a nice West Country accent. So I was kind of desperately looking for somebody Bristolian to do it. But yeah, it's weird listening to your own work, isn't it? In somebody else's voice.
It is. It's lovely if you get. So I've been very lucky because they've given me a choice of I think 6, and they just sent me sound bites from each one of them. And then it's lovely when you do start to listen, and I don't tend to listen to the whole of my book back, but I do listen to a couple of chapters, and it's lovely when you get the same sort of sentence roll that you would do yourself if you were reading it yourself. And it's lovely if you just catch somebody who does it in the same way that you would, with the same pauses, and sometimes you just do fall lucky. It's good.
We've got about 3 minutes left. Right.
That's flown past.
I know. Well, it's
Yeah, it has.
absolutely lovely listening to all of you. Finish us off with a reminder of what you write and what people are going to go away and buy if they've been sat here enjoying the chat.
Okay. Shall I go first?
Susan?
Okay, this is my latest book out. It's called You Left Me. It's book 5 in the Joe Bowden case file series. It's a psychological thriller. Also, anybody who wants to sign up to my newsletter at susanwilkins.co.uk, I will send them a free story.
Oh, lovely.
Brilliant.
I might be doing that. Kate, would you like to go next?
Oh, thank you. I set down in the Isles of Scilly. If you like your crime on small islands, then go. It's 99p on Kindle at the moment if you're an e-reader like me. So yeah, hope you like it.
So I've got the series, which is, if you're specifically here to listen about police procedurals, that's where I would direct you to Find Her Alive, which is the first in the series and has a Dalmatian in it. Everything and a dog.
Yeah, me too. I've got a lovely wolfhound.
So I'm Diane Saxon, dianesaxon.com. If you want to have a look at my website, and I'm on Facebook, and I talk very much about my chickens and my cats and my dogs.
I thought it was perfect that you said there was a Dalmatian in your dog as a dog barked behind you.
Yes, I know. We've got
Cool.
So a lot of family here. Everybody's brought their dogs. I think there's more dogs than family.
Just
We've
feel
all got
lucky
2
that
dogs each.
just feel really glad that my wolfhound didn't just appear, because it's got
Well,
the
that's
loudest.
why I got up earlier, because there was a dog crying at the door, and I thought, oh, there's somebody wants to be in.
Sorry about that.
Well, and all that's left to say is thank you. Thanks you so much for joining us. I'm sorry, Kate, that you had such a hassle.
Sorry.
So
Oh, I loved it.
you made it.
No, it's great. Lovely,
It's
lovely
been-
to
it was
talk to you
lovely just
all.
to get half of you, though. Thank you
Yeah,
very much for
Really
having me.
enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I'm off to have pudding now that everybody's cleared the table.
Yeah.
Excellent. Nice to talk to you all.
Thanks so
Thank you
much.
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.